Have you ever judged someone by their appearance? By the faded fabric of their shirt or the worn-out soles of their shoes? We all have. But what if the person you dismissed was the one person you desperately needed to impress? What if the waitress you mocked held the keys to your entire future? This isn't just a story about a mistaken identity. It's a story about what happens when the invisible suddenly becomes seen, when the corridors of power lead directly to the kitchen floor, and when one man's casual cruelty threatens to bring his entire empire crashing down. Stay with me, because the truth is always served last. Catherine Beaumont felt more like a ghost than a CEO. In the 6 months since her father, Arthur Beaumont, had passed away, she had inhabited his corner office on the 55th floor of the Beaumont Tower, like a spectre. The vast expanse of glass offered a god's-eye view of Chicago, a city her father had helped shape one luxury hotel and 5-star restaurant at a time. The Beaumont Hospitality Group was his legacy, a titan of the industry, synonymous with opulence and impeccable service. Now it was hers. The weight of it was suffocating. She wore her tailored Dior suits like armor, her hair pulled back in a severe chignon, her expression a carefully constructed mask of authority. She chaired board meetings, analyzed quarterly reports, and negotiated billion-dollar deals with a precision that would have made her father proud. But at night, in the sterile quiet of her penthouse, the mask would crumble. She'd look in the mirror and see not a leader, but a daughter lost in her father's colossal shadow. Arthur Beaumont hadn't been born into wealth. He'd started as a dishwasher, his knuckles raw and his back aching. He always said, "The soul of this company isn't in the boardroom, Catherine. It's in the laundry rooms, the kitchens, the hallways. It's in the people whose names nobody bothers to learn." He had made a point, even as CEO, to spend 1 week every year working in one of his own establishments, undercover. He'd be a bellhopper janitor, a line cook. He called it his reality check. The idea began as a whisper in her mind, a desperate, almost insane impulse. What if she did the same? The board would think she'd lost her mind. Her COO, a perpetually worried man named George Sterling, would probably have a coronary. But the whisper grew louder. She was negotiating a monumental partnership with Valente Tech, a deal spearheaded by its mercurial founder, Marco Valente. This deal would modernize the entire Beaumont guest experience, integrating cutting-edge tech into every facet of their service. It was the future of the company. Valente was known to be brilliant, demanding, and notoriously difficult to impress. His team was doing their due diligence touring Beaumont properties. But Catherine felt a disconnect. She was selling a promise of service she hadn't experienced herself, not from the ground up. She wanted to feel the company's soul just as her father had. She wanted to know if the values he'd instilled were still breathing in the heart of his empire, or if they were just pretty words in a corporate mission statement. The target was Aurelia, their flagship restaurant, a temple of modern gastronomy with a 3-month waiting list and prices that made aristocrats blink. It was the jewel in the Beaumont crown, and according to internal reports, a model of efficiency and employee satisfaction. Catherine had her doubts. Perfection was often a pretty mask for something ugly. Her first call was to Sarah Jenkins, the head of human resources, and one of the few people she trusted implicitly. Sarah had been her father's confidant and had known Catherine since she was a girl. "You want to do what?" Sarah's voice crackled over the secure line, a mixture of shock and something that sounded suspiciously like delight. "You heard me," Catherine said, pacing her office. "I want a job, waitress, at Aurelia, and no one can know who I am. I need a new identity, a believable backstory, and a spot on the roster that won't raise any flags." There was a long pause. Arthur would have loved this. Sarah finally said, her voice soft. "He always said you had more of him in you than you knew. All right, Catherine, let's get you a job. Welcome to the minimum wage." The transformation was jarring. Catherine Beaumont, the CEO, ceased to exist. In her place was Kate, a woman in her late 20s with a backstory of drifting from city to city, working odd jobs to make ends meet. Sarah's team had crafted a sparse but plausible resume. Catherine's contribution was the wardrobe. She spent an afternoon in a second-hand store, the foreign scent of forgotten histories clinging to the clothes. She bought faded black trousers, non-slip shoes with almost smooth soles, and a few thin grey t-shirts that had seen better days. She let her hair down, abandoning the sleek chignon for a simple, slightly messy ponytail. She scrubbed off her expensive manicure, leaving her nails bare. Looking in the mirror was like seeing a stranger. The woman staring back looked tired, anxious. The expensive, subtle confidence she usually wore was gone, replaced by a vulnerability she hadn't felt in years. This was good. This was what she needed. Kate was believable. Her first day at Aurelia was a system shock. She entered through the staff entrance in the back alley, a world away from the grand marble-floored lobby she had walked through for press events. The air was thick with the smells of bleach, hot oil, and stress. The calm, swan-like grace of the dining room was powered by the frantic, churning legs of the kitchen and its staff. She was introduced to her shift manager, a woman named Isabella Rossi. Isabella was immaculate, her black uniform perfectly starched, her dark hair coiled in a flawless bun. She had sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that never quite reached them. She looked Kate up and down, her gaze lingering on the worn-out shoes. A faint, almost imperceptible sneer touched her lips. "You're the new girl." "Kate," she said, her voice crisp and cold. "Jenkins from HR fast-tracked you. Must have a guardian angel. Don't expect one here." She handed Kate a thin apron. "Your station is the back corridor. Water, bread, and bussing. Don't speak to the guests unless they speak to you first. Don't get in the way. And for God's sake, try to look like you don't sleep in a bus station." The barb stung a sharp, surprising prick to her ego. Catherine, the CEO, would have fired her on the spot, but Kate, the waitress, just nodded meekly. "Yes, ma'am." "It's Isabella," she snapped. "Not ma'am, we're not in the army." The first few hours were a blur of organized chaos. Kate's job was menial but relentless, hauling heavy trays of dirty dishes to the deafening clamor of the dish pit, polishing endless rows of wine glasses until her fingers ached, refilling water glasses with a pitcher that seemed to weigh 100 pounds. Her muscles, accustomed to Pilates and personal training sessions, screamed in protest. It was during a brief lull that she met David Chen. He was an older waiter, probably in his late 50s, with kind, crinkled eyes and a calm demeanor that seemed out of place in the restaurant's frantic energy. He was polishing silverware at a small station, his movements efficient and practiced. He saw her wincing as she stretched her back. "First day?" he asked, his voice warm. "Is it that obvious?" Kate replied with a weak smile. "Everyone looks like that on their first day." He chuckled. "I'm David. If you need anything, just ask. Isabella can be a bit sharp." "A bit," Kate agreed, rubbing her sore shoulder. "She's all about appearances," David said, his voice dropping slightly. "This place is her kingdom. Just keep your head down, do your work, and you'll be fine." He paused, looking at her more closely. "You know you have kind eyes. Reminds me of the old man." "The old man?" Kate asked, her heart giving a little jolt. "Mr. Beaumont, the founder," David said with a fond smile. "He used to come by years ago. Not as the big boss, you know. He'd just sit at the bar, or sometimes even help out in the kitchen when they were in the weeds. He said he liked to see how the engine was running. He had that same look, like he was really seeing you, not just looking at you. Tears pricked Kate's eyes, and she turned away quickly, pretending to check a stack of napkins. Her father's ghost was here, in the memories of a kind waiter who had no idea who he was talking to. The discomfort, the aching muscles, the manager's scorn, it all melted away for a moment, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. She wasn't just a ghost in her father's office anymore. She was on the ground, seeking his soul. And she had a feeling she was in exactly the right place. The first week bled into the second, and Kate's life took on a grueling rhythm defined by the chiming of service bells and the ache in her feet. The glamour of Aurelia became a thin veneer over a world of relentless pressure. She learned the unspoken language of the staff, a nod to signal a table needed, clearing a sharp glance to warn of an approaching manager, a shared, weary sigh in the momentary quiet of the locker room. Catherine, the CEO, was a distant memory. Kate, the waitress, was her reality. She learned to balance 3 overflowing plates on one arm, to memorize complex orders under pressure, and to develop a sixth sense for when a diner's water glass was 2/3 empty. She learned that a server's smile was a piece of armor, worn regardless of how rude a customer was or how much her back throbbed. Her primary tormentor remained Isabella. The manager seemed to have singled Kate out as her personal project for humiliation. The mockery was rarely overt enough to be reported, but it was constant, a slow drip poison. "Kate, your apron has a spot on it." "Again," Isabella would say in front of other staff members, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Aurelia's standards are absolute. Perhaps they're a bit too high for you." She consistently assigned Kate to Siberia, the least desirable section of the restaurant, with the fewest tables, ensuring her tips were meager. When a wealthy, well-known regular complained that his water had been refilled too slowly, Isabella pulled Kate aside. "Do you understand who that was?" She hissed, her face inches from Kate's. "That was Mr. Peterson of Peterson Holdings. His opinion matters. Your sloppiness reflects on me, on all of us. Get it together, or you'll be cleaning grease traps." Every insult, every unfair criticism, Catherine logged away in her mind. It wasn't about her own hurt feelings anymore. It was about the culture. If this was happening to her, it was happening to others. She saw the fear in the eyes of the younger staff, the way they flinched when Isabella approached. This wasn't the healthy, respectful workplace her father had envisioned. This was a place ruled by fear. David Chen remained her only real ally. He would discreetly pass her a protein bar when she missed a meal break and offer quiet words of encouragement. "Don't let her get to you," he'd murmur as they passed in the service corridor. "Your work is good. You're clean, you're fast. She just needs a target." During one shared late-night closing shift, while they were rolling silverware into napkins, David opened up. "You know, Mr. Beaumont would have hated what this place has become," he said, not looking at her. "He used to say that a happy staff means happy guests. He cared. He knew my wife's name was Eleanor, that my son was applying to college. He sent a gift when my first grandchild was born." David shook his head slowly. "Now it's all about numbers, about appearances. The heart is gone." Catherine's own heart ached to hear it. "What changed?" she asked, her voice quiet. "He died," David said simply. And the daughter took over. The new CEO. We never see her, of course. She's probably just like the rest of them. Lives up in an ivory tower looking at spreadsheets, has no idea what it's like down here. The soul of this place died with him. The words were a punch to the gut. Ivory tower, spreadsheets. No idea. It was everything she had feared she was becoming. It was the very reason she was here. Maybe she just doesn't know. Kate offered her voice, barely a whisper. David gave a sad, cynical smile. They never do. It was a few nights later that Kate stumbled upon the second crack in Aurelia's perfect facade. The restaurant had a tip pooling system. All gratuities were collected, and a percentage was distributed among the bus's bartenders and hosts, with the rest divided among the waiters based on their hours. It was meant to be a fair system, but Kate, who was still a CEO at heart, had a mind for numbers. Her take-home amount, even on the rare, busy night she was allowed a decent section, seemed consistently mathematically wrong. It was always a few dollars less than she calculated it should be. It wasn't much, but it was enough to notice. One night she stayed late, feigning a forgotten item in her locker. She watched from the shadows of the corridor as Isabella tallied the night's earnings in her small glass-walled office. She saw Isabella carefully separate the credit card slips from the cash. She watched as the manager entered the credit card tips into the payroll system, then counted the cash. And then she saw it. Isabella took a small, neat stack of bills from the cash pile and slipped it into her purse before bundling the rest for deposit. It was so slick, so practiced, it was almost invisible. $100 here, maybe $200 there. Skimmed from the cash tips before they were ever officially recorded. Over a week, a month, a year, it would add up to thousands of dollars stolen directly from the pockets of the staff, from David, who was trying to help his son with college, from Maria, the hostess who worked 2 jobs to support her mother, from every single person who worked under Isabella's thumb. The rage that filled Catherine was cold and sharp. This wasn't just bullying or poor management. This was theft. This was a betrayal of the trust her father had placed in his people. She discreetly took out her phone, hiding behind a large potted plant, and filmed for 30 seconds, just long enough to capture Isabella pocketing the cash. The video was grainy, but it was undeniable proof. The next day, the restaurant was buzzing with an electric tension. An email had gone out. Marco Valente, the tech billionaire, was coming to Aurelia for a dinner meeting to finalize the last stages of the partnership with Beaumont Hospitality. His visit was the final informal seal of approval. The entire future of the company, Catherine's signature initiative, hinged on this dinner. Isabella gathered the staff for a pre-shift meeting. Her eyes were alight with a feverish intensity. Tonight is the most important night in the history of this restaurant, she announced, her voice ringing with self-importance. Marco Valente is not just any guest. He is a kingmaker. His experience tonight will be reported directly to corporate. Everything must be beyond perfect. The silverware must gleam. The glasses must be invisible. Every plate must be a work of art. Every smile must be genuine. She scanned the assembled staff, her eyes landing, as they so often did, on Kate. "You," she said, pointing a sharp finger. "You will be in the kitchen tonight, polishing glasses. You are not to enter the dining room. I will not have him see this." She gestured vaguely at Kate's simple, clean but worn uniform. "Your particular brand of shabby chic is not the image we are presenting tonight. Am I understood?" A murmur went through the staff. It was a public and brutal demotion. Kate felt the flush of humiliation creep up her neck. But inside, a cold resolve settled. This was perfect. Isabella, in her arrogance, was making a fatal error. And Marco Valente, the man whose judgment she supposedly valued so highly, was about to be part of the final test. She had planned to observe him, and now she would see how he and his team behaved when they thought no one of importance was watching. "Understood, Isabella," Kate said, her voice even. She retreated to the steamy confines of the kitchen, her mind a whirlwind of stolen tips, her father's legacy, and the impending arrival of the man who held her company's future in his hands. The stage was set for a disaster or for a reckoning. The atmosphere in Aurelia's kitchen was a pressure cooker set to explode. Chefs barked orders in a staccato rhythm of French and Spanish pans sizzled, and the air was a humid tapestry of a dozen competing delicious aromas. Confined to a small sweltering corner by the dish pit, Kate polished wineglass after wineglass, her movements automatic. Each gleaming goblet was a testament to her invisibility. Isabella wanted her hidden, and hidden she was. From her vantage point, she could just peek through the swinging doors into the serene, gilded world of the dining room. She watched Marco Valente and his party of 3 arrive. He was exactly as he appeared in business magazines, impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than her car, with dark, restless eyes and an air of impatient brilliance. He didn't walk. He strode as if the world was struggling to keep up with him. Isabella greeted them with a dazzling, servile smile, personally escorting them to the best table in the house, a secluded corner booth with a panoramic view of the city lights. For an hour, the dinner service proceeded with military precision. Kate continued her mind-numbing task, her thoughts racing. She had the proof of Isabella's theft on her phone. She had David's heartbreaking testimony about the company's lost soul, and now she was about to see the character of the man she was betting the company's future on. Then disaster struck. Or as it turned out, opportunity. A young waiter, barely out of his teens and trembling with nerves, was carrying a tray with a bottle of vintage Chateau Margaux for Valente's table. As he approached, another waiter, rushing from the kitchen, bumped into him. The collision was minor, but the result was catastrophic. The young waiter stumbled, and the decanter of deep red wine flew from his grasp, arcing through the air and splashing directly onto the crisp white shirt of one of Valente's associates. A collective gasp went through the dining room. The associate leaped to his feet, cursing. The young waiter stood, frozen, his face ashen with terror. Isabella descended on the scene like a hawk. Her face was a mask of fury. "You incompetent fool!" she snarled at the young man, her voice a low, vicious hiss meant only for the staff to hear. "Get to the back. Now!" She turned to the table, her expression instantly transforming into one of deep, apologetic concern. "Mr. Valente, gentlemen, I am so dreadfully sorry. This is inexcusable. We will, of course, handle the dry cleaning and comp your entire meal." "Forget the meal," the stained man grumbled, dabbing at his chest with a napkin. "This shirt is ruined. We need more wine." Marco Valente said, his voice sharp and dismissive. He didn't even look at the panicked waiter being shuffled away. He just looked annoyed, as if a fly had buzzed too close to his head. Isabella's eyes darted around frantically. Her best waiters were occupied. The junior staff were terrified. Her gaze swept past the kitchen doors and landed on Kate. It was a look of pure desperation, mixed with disgust. There was no one else. "You," she mouthed silently, beckoning with a furious jerk of her head. "Get out here. Now. Just serve the wine. Don't speak." Kate's heart hammered against her ribs. She wiped her sweaty palms on her apron, placed the polishing cloth down, and walked through the swinging doors. The sudden quiet of the dining room was jarring. She felt 100 pairs of eyes on her as she approached the most important table in the restaurant. David from across the room gave her a small, encouraging nod. She approached the table, her movements steady and composed. She picked up a fresh napkin from a service stand and began to discreetly clean the small puddle of wine on the floor. "Just leave it," Marco Valente said impatiently, not even looking at her. He was scrolling through something on his phone. "Just get the wine." One of his associates, a younger man with a cruel smirk, leaned over to his stained colleague. "Look at this one," he murmured loud enough for Kate to hear clearly. "They must be getting desperate. Did she get that uniform from a charity bin? The other man chuckled. Probably. Can't be making much if she has to wear shoes that sad. Kate froze for a fraction of a second. The insult was so casual, so thoughtless. It wasn't even directed at her, but at the idea of her, at the poor, invisible person they assumed she was. She looked up, and her eyes met Marco Valente's for a brief moment. There was no reproval in his gaze, no sign that he disapproved of his associate's comment. There was just blank, indifferent dismissal. He had heard them, and he didn't care. In that moment, Catherine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the restaurant's air conditioning. This was the man she was about to entrust with her father's legacy. A man who sat silently, while his team mocked a person they believed to be beneath them. Isabella returned with a new bottle of wine, her face tight with stress. "Kate will serve you," she said to the table, then turned to Kate. "Be careful," she whispered venomously. "Don't mess this up." Kate took the bottle. Her hands were steady. Her training as a CEO, her years of maintaining composure in high-stakes negotiations kicked in. She presented the bottle to Valente, her voice low and professional. "Chateau Margaux, 2005. Valente grunted his approval without looking up from his phone. As she poured the wine with a practiced, steady hand, Isabella hovered nearby, watching her every move like a predator. She was so focused on Kate's performance that she didn't notice Valente's associate subtly sticking his foot out into the narrow space between the tables. As Kate stepped back from the table, her foot caught on his outstretched loafer. She stumbled, not hard, but enough to make her lose her balance for a second. A tiny amount of wine, no more than a few drops, sloshed from the bottle onto the pristine white tablecloth. It was nothing. A minor spill. But for Isabella, it was the final straw. "That's it!" she shrieked, her carefully controlled facade shattering completely. The entire dining room fell silent. Diners turning to stare. "You are a disaster, an embarrassment." She grabbed Kate by the arm, her fingers digging in like talons. "You are fired. Get out, get your things, and get out of my restaurant. I will not have this incompetence tainting Aurelia's reputation on our most important night." The public humiliation was absolute. The diners stared, some with pity, some with morbid curiosity. Marco Valente and his team watched as if it were a floor show, a minor diversion. The associate who had tripped her looked smug. David started to move forward, a protest on his lips, but Isabella shot him a look that could kill. Catherine looked at Isabella's hate-filled face. She looked at the smirking faces at Valente's table, and she looked at the shock and fear on the faces of the other staff. She didn't fight. She didn't argue. She simply pulled her arm free from Isabella's grasp, her expression unreadable. "Fine," she said, her voice quiet but clear. She turned and walked away, not towards the staff locker room, but straight towards the main entrance. She walked past the gawking diners, past the grand floral arrangements, and out through the heavy glass doors into the cool Chicago night. She didn't look back. Isabella, breathing heavily, turned back to Valente's table, forcing a smile. "My deepest apologies. She is gone. Now may I offer you all a complimentary dessert from our pastry chef." She was triumphant. She had excised the blemish protected her perfect kingdom. She had no idea she had just fired her executioner. Outside, standing on the curb, Catherine Beaumont took a deep breath. The Kate persona fell away like a snake's skin. The CEO was back, and she had everything she needed. She pulled out her phone, not to call a cab, but to call George Sterling, her COO. "George," she said, her voice like ice, "clear my morning, and book the main dining room at Aurelia for a 10A. Emergency corporate mandate meeting. I want the entire restaurant staff there. On the clock. And George, make sure Marco Valente and his executive team are personally invited. Tell them it's the final signing for our partnership." There was a pause on the line. "Catherine, is everything all right?" "Everything," she replied, a dangerous calm settling over her, "is about to be set right." The next morning, an unusual energy filled Aurelia. The restaurant was closed to the public, a sign on the door reading, "Closed for a private corporate event." Inside, the entire staff, waiters, hosts, cooks, dishwashers were gathered in the main dining room, milling about in confused clusters. They had been summoned for a mandatory all-hands meeting at 10 a.m., an unheard-of event. Isabella Rossi moved through the room with an air of supreme importance. She had received the email from corporate late last night and had interpreted it as a direct result of her decisive actions. Clearly, head office had heard about the Valente dinner, and this meeting was to commend her for her swift, professional handling of the incident. She wore her sharpest uniform, her makeup was flawless, and she was already composing the speech she would give when they inevitably offered her a promotion. She saw David Chen standing by the window, a worried frown on his face. "Lighten up, David," she said with a smug smile. "This is a good thing. It shows that corporate is finally paying attention to standards. My standards." David just shook his head, his eyes scanning the room. He was looking for Kate. He felt a deep sense of guilt for not defending her more forcefully last night. He hoped she was okay. At precisely 10 a.m., the front doors opened. In walked George Sterling, the COO, his face grim. He was followed by several other stern-faced executives from the Beaumont Hospitality Group. The staff fell silent, intimidated by the sudden influx of corporate power. A moment later, Marco Valente and his 2 associates from the previous night arrived. Valente looked impatient, tapping at his phone. He had been told this was a formality, a final signing ceremony before a press release. He nodded curtly at Isabella, who beamed at him as if they were co-conspirators. "All right, George, let's get this over with," Valente said briskly. "Where are the papers? And where is your CEO? I was told I'd finally meet the elusive Catherine Beaumont." As if on cue, the doors opened one last time. The woman who walked in was not Kate. This woman commanded the room the second she entered it. She wore a deep navy blue power suit that was impeccably tailored. Her blonde hair was styled in an elegant, professional chignon, and she walked with a quiet, unshakable confidence that radiated authority. Her eyes, cool and intelligent, swept across the room, taking in every detail. The staff stared confused. Marco Valente looked intrigued. Isabella Rossi stared, and the blood drained from her face. Her smug smile faltered, then collapsed entirely. Her mind refused to process what her eyes were seeing. It was the woman she had fired. It was the waitress with the worn-out shoes and the stained apron. But it wasn't. It couldn't be. The eyes were the same, but the power behind them was terrifying. The woman walked to the front of the room, standing before the assembled crowd. George Sterling moved to her side. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice calm, clear, and amplified by the room's acoustics. It was the same voice that had said, "Fine," before walking out the door last night, but now it held the weight of an entire corporation. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Catherine Beaumont. I am the CEO of the Beaumont Hospitality Group." A collective gasp went through the staff. Jaws dropped. David Chen's eyes widened in stunned disbelief, a slow smile of dawning comprehension spreading across his face. He looked from Catherine back to Isabella, whose face had gone from pale to a ghastly shade of grey. She looked like she might faint. Marco Valente and his team stopped what they were doing, their expressions shifting from boredom to utter shock. The associate who had tripped her looked physically ill. Catherine's gaze settled on her staff. My father, Arthur Beaumont, founded this company on a simple principle that our strength is our people. He believed that to understand a business, you have to understand it from the ground up. For the past few weeks, I have been honored to work alongside you all here at Aurelia. She gestured vaguely to herself. Though you knew me as Kate. Another wave of murmurs. As Kate, Catherine continued, her voice hardening slightly. I learned many things. I learned that many of you work tirelessly with dignity and grace under immense pressure. I saw the dedication in the kitchen, the professionalism of servers like David Chen, and the resilience of our entire support staff. You are the heart of this company, and I am deeply proud of you. She paused, letting the word sink in. Then her gaze shifted and locked directly onto Isabella Rossi. But I also learned that the heart of this restaurant is sick. It's been poisoned by a culture of fear, humiliation, and disrespect. A culture that judges people on the cost of their clothes rather than the content of their character. A culture that my father would have despised. Isabella began to tremble, opening her mouth to speak, but no words came out. As Kate, I was publicly mocked, consistently undermined, and assigned to the worst stations to limit my earnings, all because my manager disapproved of my appearance. Catherine said, her voice dropping to a steely calm. But my experience was not unique. I saw it happen to others. I saw fear used as a management tool, and that ends. Today. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The quiet authority was more damning than any shout. Furthermore, Catherine said, pulling her phone from her pocket, I discovered something far worse than bullying. I discovered theft. She tapped the screen, and a video played, projected by a small device one of her aides had set up. The grainy footage filled a blank wall. It was shaky, but the image was clear. Isabella Rossi, alone in her office, slipping a stack of cash from the tip pool into her handbag. The staff gasped again, this time in anger. It all made sense now, the consistently low tip-outs, the excuses, Isabella's expensive new car. Isabella Rossi, Catherine said, her voice ringing with finality. For theft from your staff, and for creating a toxic and abusive work environment in direct violation of Beaumont Company policy, your employment is terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. 2 uniformed security guards who had been waiting discreetly by the door stepped forward. Isabella was speechless, her face a grotesque mask of shock and terror. She looked pleadingly at the corporate executives at Marco Valente, but found no help. They stared back with cold disdain. As the guards led her away, she finally found her voice, a pathetic whimper. But I was just maintaining standards. The room was silent as she was escorted out. Catherine let the moment hang in the air, a clear message to everyone present. Then she turned her attention to Marco Valente. Her expression was no longer angry. It was one of cool, professional assessment. Mr. Valente, she began, we were scheduled to sign our partnership agreement this morning, a deal that would link our brands for the next decade. A Beaumont partnership is more than a business transaction. It's a statement of shared values. Values like integrity, respect, and the ability to see worth in people, not just in their price tags. Valente stood up, his face pale. He was no longer the arrogant titan. He was a man in a very deep hole. Miss Beaumont, I had no idea. Oh, I believe you didn't know who I was, Catherine said, cutting him off smoothly. But you were there, you and your team. You were there last night when a member of your staff openly mocked a waitress for her clothes. You were there when another one of your associates deliberately tripped her. And you sat there in silence. You saw a person being humiliated, and your only concern was getting your next glass of wine. Your judgment, Mr. Valente, was on full display. She took a step closer. My father used to say, "You can judge the character of a man by how he treats those who can do nothing for him." I was Kate the waitress. I could do nothing for you, and I saw your character. She walked over to the table where the contract lay waiting. She picked up the thick, beautifully bound document. "The Beaumont-Valente partnership as it stands is cancelled," she declared, her voice echoing in the stunned silence. She let the contract fall from her hand. It hit the floor with a soft, final thud. Marco Valente looked as though she had just struck him. His multi-billion-dollar deal, his grand entrance into the hospitality sector, had just evaporated before his eyes. The soft, definitive thud of the contract hitting the plush carpet echoed in the cavernous silence of the dining room. It was a sound more powerful than a gunshot, a quiet execution of a billion-dollar deal. For a long moment, nobody moved. The assembled staff of Aurelia, who had just witnessed the public firing of their tormentor, now watched wide-eyed as a titan of the tech world was brought to his knees. Marco Valente stared at the discarded document on the floor, as if it were a physical manifestation of his own failure. His face, usually a mask of sharp, predatory intelligence, had crumbled. The color had drained from it, leaving behind a waxy pallor. His two associates, who last night had been so full of smug superiority, now seemed to shrink into their expensive suits. One of them, the man who had tripped Kate, was visibly trembling, avoiding Catherine's gaze at all costs. He looked like a schoolboy about to be expelled, the swagger of the previous night replaced by a raw, pathetic fear. Valente finally lifted his eyes from the floor, not to Catherine, but to the shocked faces of the restaurant staff. He saw them properly for the first time, not as service units or background figures, but as people. He saw the weariness in their posture, the hope in their eyes, and the quiet dignity they maintained. It was as if a veil had been lifted, forcing him to confront the human cost of his own casual indifference. He finally turned to Catherine, and when he spoke, his voice was raw, stripped of all its practiced boardroom polish. "Miss Beaumont, Catherine." He began the name catching in his throat. "There are moments in your life that serve as mirrors, forcing you to see yourself as you truly are. Last night and this morning, this has been one of those moments for me." He took a shaky breath. "I grew up with nothing. My father was a mechanic, my mother cleaned houses. I wore second-hand clothes that never quite fit. I remember the shame. I remember how people looked through me, or worse, looked down on me." He shook his head, a look of profound self-disgust on his face. "I spent the last 20 years building an empire so that no one could ever make me feel that way again. But in the process, I became them. I became the man who looks at another person's worn-out shoes and feels nothing but disdain. I became everything I once hated." He gestured towards his two stunned associates. "And I fostered that culture in my own team, a culture of arrogance, of entitlement. That is my failure. Not just losing this deal, but losing my own humanity along the way." He looked directly at Catherine, his eyes pleading not for the deal, but for something more fundamental. "You are right. Your father's legacy is one of character. Mine, I see now, has been one of calculation. There is no excuse for our behavior. It was despicable. I am profoundly and deeply sorry." Catherine listened, her expression unreadable. She saw past the polished apology to the core of the man. She recognized the sincerity born of utter humiliation. Her goal was never simply to punish, it was to protect her company's soul. She had to decide if he was capable of change, or if his remorse was merely the fleeting regret of being caught. "Regret is a powerful motivator, Mr. Valente," she said, her voice even and measured. But it's also temporary. The real test is what you do when the shame fades and the world isn't watching anymore. A partnership with Beaumont Hospitality is a public declaration of shared values. As of now, we do not share them. She let the finality of that statement hang in the air before continuing. However, I believe in growth more than I believe in destruction. You say you want to change. Prove it. She took a step closer, her voice dropping, intended for him alone. Don't send me a proposal. Send me proof. Show me a new code of conduct, for Valente Tech, one that has teeth. Show me an employee wellness program that isn't just for PR. Show me how you are changing the culture you just admitted to creating. Show me how you treat the cleaning staff in your own building. When your actions align with your words, perhaps we can have another conversation. It was not a yes. It was a challenge, a steep, almost impossible mountain for him to climb. But it was not a no. It was a sliver of a chance at redemption, and from the look on his face, he understood its immense value. He nodded slowly, a profound, weary gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. It was the most honest thing he had said all morning. Without another word, he turned and led his silent, humbled team out of the restaurant, leaving the discarded contract on the floor as a monument to their failure. As the doors closed behind them, a collective sigh of relief went through the room. The oppressive cloud of fear and tension that had lingered under Isabella and the acute shock of the confrontation with Valente finally dissipated. In its place, a fragile, hopeful atmosphere began to grow. Catherine turned her full attention back to the staff. Her people. Her expression softened, the hard CEO mask dissolving to reveal the empathetic leader she had become. "Today," she said, her voice resonating with warmth, "we start over. We reaffirm the foundation on which my father built this company. My time here showed me the incredible strength and resilience you all possess. It also showed me the cracks in our own foundation, cracks I intend to seal starting now." Her eyes scanned the crowd and found David Chen. He was standing near the back, looking overwhelmed, his eyes still shining with unshed tears. He had watched the entire exchange as if in a dream. As Catherine began, a small smile playing on her lips. "I was often cold-tired and discouraged, but there was always one person who offered a kind word, who slipped me a protein bar when he knew I'd missed a meal, who told me not to let the darkness win." She walked slowly towards him, the crowd parting before her. "There was one person who, without knowing who I was, defended me. But more importantly, he consistently defended the memory of my father and the principles this company was supposed to stand for. He was the keeper of Aurelia's soul when everyone else had forgotten it." She stood before him now. David looked at her, his face a canvas of disbelief and humility. "David Chen," she said, her voice clear and strong, "your integrity, your kindness, and your quiet leadership haven't gone unnoticed. I can think of no one better to guide this restaurant into its new era. It is my profound honor to promote you to the position of General Manager of Aurelia, effective immediately." For a second, David simply stared, unable to process the words. Then the staff erupted. It was not polite applause. It was a roar of genuine, heartfelt joy. Cooks left their stations to rush out buses, dropped their trays, and the entire team surged forward, engulfing David in a wave of congratulations and backpats. He was one of them, and his victory was their victory. He looked at Catherine over the shoulders of his cheering colleagues, his face streaming with tears, and mouthed the words, "Thank you." Catherine let the joyful chaos reign for a minute before raising a hand. When the room quieted, she continued her tone, now firm with purpose. This change is not just for Aurelia. This is for all 50,000 employees of the Beaumont Group. I am immediately implementing 3 new foundational policies. First, a complete overhaul of our management training protocols. From now on, promotions to management will not be based solely on performance metrics, but on peer reviews and demonstrated empathetic leadership. A manager who cannot foster a respectful and supportive team is not a leader. They are a liability. That ends today. Second, she said her thoughts on the stolen tips. We are establishing the Beaumont Integrity Line, a fully anonymous third-party ethics hotline for all employees. If you see something wrong, be it harassment, theft, or any form of abuse, you will have a safe and powerful way to report it without fear of retribution. Every single report will be investigated at the highest corporate level. We will protect our people. And finally, she said, her voice softening with emotion as she thought of her father, I want to honor the spirit that started it all. We are creating the Arthur Beaumont Founders Award. Each year, one employee from anywhere in our global family, a housekeeper, a bellhop, a line cook, a concierge who is nominated by their peers for best exemplifying our core values of integrity and kindness, will receive a $50,000 bonus and an all-expenses-paid family vacation to any Beaumont property in the world. We will celebrate the soul of this company by rewarding it. A wave of stunned, joyous murmurs swept the room. It was more than they could have imagined. It was a promise of real, tangible change. Catherine looked out at the sea of faces that were no longer just a workforce, but individuals with names, families and stories she now felt connected to. The ghost in the 55th floor office was gone for good. In her place stood a leader forged not in a boardroom, but in the heat of a kitchen, the ache of tired feet, and the quiet dignity of overlooked people. She had gone looking for her father's soul, and in the end, she had found her own. She had secured his legacy, not by preserving it in glass, but by breathing new life into it on the ground where it mattered most. That day, a legend was born within the Beaumont Hospitality Group, not the legend of a distant CEO, but of Kate, the waitress who reminded everyone that true value is never about the price tag on your clothes, but the integrity in your heart. Catherine's story is a powerful reminder that leaders aren't just found in boardrooms. They are forged in moments of quiet observation, in the courage to walk in another's worn-out shoes, and in the strength to stand up for what is right, no matter the cost. What do you think? Did Marco Valente deserve a second chance? Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone was completely misjudged? Share your stories and thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe for more real-life stories that inspire and make you think. Click that notification bell so you never miss what happens next.